Scotland is a land of myth and legend. Its natural beauty and culture is surpassed by none. A land of castles, cathedrals and abbeys, its history is rich, varied and often bloody. Its cathedrals have witnessed wars, famine and the Scottish Reformation. In this video, we will explore Scotland's top 5 must-visit cathedrals. In at number 5. This is Dunkeld Cathedral, which is an ancient sacred place. There was a Pictish monastery on this site before the cathedral was built, and the site remains an ecclesiastical use today. Kenneth MacAlpin had relics of Columba brought to a specially constructed church here in 849 AD, as repeated Viking raids made their original home in Iona unsafe. This church is now long gone, but there are carved stones which attest to this early activity. King David I recognised the bishoprics in Scotland, and Cormac was named the first bishop of Dunkeld and held this post until 1132. In 1555, a former canon of the cathedral, Abbot Alexander Milne of Cambus Kenneth, wrote a history of the lives of the bishops of Dunkeld. This book also contains a contemporary account of the cleansing of the cathedral during the Reformation. Construction of the cathedral took around 250 years from the mid-1200s to the late 1400s, although little work was done in the 1300s. The choir, which is now used as the parish church and was the earliest part of the cathedral, was built in the mid to late 1200s. The tomb of Alexander Stewart, Earl of Buchan, also known as the Wolf of Badenoch, is buried here after his death in 1394. His tomb, mounted with his armoured effigy, can still be seen today. Dunkeld Cathedral is just 20 minutes from Perth up the A9, and it is free to enter. In at number 4. This is Glasgow Cathedral. In the 6th century, St Mungo is said to have brought the body of a holy man called Fergus for burial at a site named Cathars, which later became known as Glasgow. St Ninian is reputed to have dedicated the burial ground here in the 5th century. St Mungo built a monastic cell in the burial ground and was buried in this church here in 614 AD. His shrine, which is in the lower part of the cathedral, was an important place of pilgrimage during the medieval period. Little is known about the early church buildings except that they would have been built using timber and wattle. The first stone cathedral was initiated by David I, and the new cathedral was consecrated in 1136. It was constructed over St Mungo's burial place. In 1175, Pope Alexander III recognised Glasgow as a special daughter of Rome, freeing the diocese from the jurisdiction of the Archbishop of York. Destroyed by fire, the first cathedral was succeeded by the present cathedral, which was started between 1207 and 1232. Edward I of England visited the cathedral in August 1301 during the Wars of Independence, making offerings over 4 days at the high altar and the tomb of St Mungo. After the killing of Sir John Comyn in February 1306, Robert the Bruce hurried to Glasgow to meet up with the warrior bishop Robert Wishart. Wishart granted the Bruce absolution for the murder and urged the clergy throughout Scotland to rally to Robert the Bruce. After which Wishart accompanied Robert the Bruce to Scone, where the Bruce was made King of Scotland. Robert Wishaw died in 1316 and his body was entombed in the Lower Cathedral. The tomb is unsubscribed and the head of the effigy has been defaced, probably during the Reformation. Glasgow Cathedral can be found a 10-minute walk east from George Square, and it is free to enter. In at number 3. This is Dunblane Cathedral. This church is dedicated to the 6th century saint St Blaine, and thus gives the name to the town Dunblane, meaning Hill of St Blaine. It also had an altar to St Lawrence. The oldest surviving part of the cathedral is the lower 4 stories of the tower, which date back to around 1100 AD. The 2 upper stories date from the 1500s. This cathedral was once the seat of the bishops of Dunblane until the abolition of bishops after the Glorious Revolution in 1689. Technically, it is no longer a cathedral as there are no bishops in the Church of Scotland. After the abolition of prelacy, the choir became the parish church. The cathedral contains the graves of Margaret Drummond of Stowball, and she was a mistress of James IV. Her 2 sisters are also buried here. The building we see today is largely from the 13th century. Unusually, the cathedral is owned by the Crown. The choir contains the mural tomb of the cathedral's founder, Bishop Clement. The cathedral was restored in the late 19th century, and in April 2015, local hero and tennis player Andy Murray was married here at Dunblane Cathedral. Dunblane Cathedral can be found a few miles from Stirling and is free to enter. In at number 2. This is Elgen Cathedral. It was established in 1224 on land granted by King Alexander II. At this time it stood outside the borough of Elgin. By 1226, the new and developing cathedral was staffed with 18 canons, which increased to 23 by 1242. A damaging fire in 1270 led to significant enlargement. The cathedral remained unscathed during the Wars of Independence, but suffered extensive fire damage in 1390. The 1390 fire damage was the result of an attack by Alexander Stewart, also known as the Wolf of Badenoch. In 1402, the cathedral suffered another burning, this time by the followers of the Lord of the Isles. As the cathedral grew, so did the number of clerics and craftsmen. The repairs followed the fires of 1270 and 1390 saw the doubling of the choir and the addition of outer aisles to both the nave and the choir. A mostly intact chapter house dates to the cathedral's enlargement after the fire of 1270. The near intact gable wall above the double door entrance linking the west towers was rebuilt after the 1390 fire. By the time of the Scottish Reformation in 1560, the cathedral had 25 canons. Soon after the Reformation, the cathedral was abandoned and its services transferred to Elgin Parish Church of St Giles. The removal of the lead in 1567 marked the beginning of the end for this building, as it slowly began to decay. In 1615, a storm brought down the roof covering the east limb, and in 1711, the central steeple collapsed, taking the walls of the nave with it. Conservation efforts began in the early 19th century and continued until the end of the 20th century. The ruins of Elgen Cathedral can be found just outside the town centre of Elgen. The cost of entrance to the cathedral is £10 if a ticket is bought online, or £11 if you walk in from the street. Before we reveal the number 1 must-visit cathedral in Scotland, please take time to subscribe, share and comment on this video. Without further ado, here is the number 1 must-visit cathedral in Scotland. In at first place. Built in 1124, St Giles has sown the seeds for civil war and was the centre of the Reformation as John Knox's parish church. King David I founded St Giles in 1124. When he later founded the Abbey of Holyrood, he granted the abbot permission to build houses up the ridge, forming what we know now as the Royal Mile. In 1320, the Scots signed the Declaration of Arbroath, affirming Scottish independence. 2 years later, Edward II sent an army north and St Giles was fire damaged along with much of the city. In 1384, a meeting of the Old Alliance with France and Scotland took place in St Giles to plot a raid into England. In 1559, John Knox marched an army of followers into St Giles and preached there for the first time. The following week he was elected as minister and the building was stripped of its Catholic decoration. In 1637, Charles I tried to impose the Anglican religion and attempted to impose a new prayer book on St Giles. A local woman, Jenny Geddes, picked up her stool and threw it at the preacher, inciting a riot. St Giles Cathedral can be found halfway up the Royal Mile in Edinburgh city centre in the Old Town. It is free to enter this building. If you have enjoyed this video on the top 5 must-view cathedrals, then please subscribe and share this video out. Thank you for watching this video.